The gavel struck with finality, echoing through the hushed military courtroom. "Lieutenant Jessica Reynolds, this court sentences you to death by lethal injection." Jessie's face remained stone still, her hands gripping the wheels of her chair until her knuckles whitened. Only Shadow, her German shepherd, seemed to sense the injustice, a low growl building in his throat as military police approached. "I didn't kill him," Jessie stated, her voice steady despite the sentence. "Colonel Mitchell was my mentor." Memories flashed unbidden the blood-soaked office. Mitchell slumped at his desk, the service pistol near his hand, her wheelchair tracks through the crimson pool. The damning evidence. As they wheeled her away, Shadow's desperate howl pierced the air like a premonition. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Jessie Reynolds had once stood tall among her fellow soldiers, a decorated lieutenant specialized in explosive ordnance disposal. At 35, her once athletic frame now depended on a wheelchair, both legs lost below the knee during her final mission in Afghanistan. 3 years ago, she had crawled through a booby-trapped building to save 4 members of her unit when an overlooked IED detonated. The Purple Heart pinned to her chest did little to ease the phantom pain that still woke her screaming most nights. Shadow had come into her life during rehabilitation at Walter Reed, the specially trained German shepherd. Himself a veteran of 2 tours, had been matched with Jessie for his exceptional intuition and steady temperament. More than a service dog, Shadow had become her lifeline, sensing her pain spikes before even Jessie noticed them, waking her from nightmares, and restoring her independence one small victory at a time. Their bond transcended typical handler-service dog relationships. They had saved each other. After medical discharge, Jessie had returned to Fort Carson as a civilian consultant, helping train EOD specialists with real-world experience. Colonel Richard Mitchell, her former commanding officer, had personally arranged the position, a stern but fair leader. Mitchell had visited Jessie weekly during her recovery, bringing photographs of her old unit and updates from the field. At 52, the silver-haired officer had been nearing retirement, mentoring Jessie for a potential leadership role in veteran affairs. Amanda Reynolds, Jessie's younger sister by 5 years, had moved to Colorado Springs specifically to support Jessie's transition. A determined journalist with the Colorado Springs Gazette, Amanda possessed the tenacity and investigative skills that complemented Jessie's methodical military mind. Unlike many who treated Jessie differently after her injury, Amanda had remained refreshingly unchanged, pushing her sister when needed and defending her fiercely when warranted. Their elderly neighbor, Martha Wilson, had adopted the sisters immediately. At 78, the former military nurse had survived 2 husbands, both career Army men, and maintained a no-nonsense approach to life that resonated with Jessie. Martha's single-story ranch house backed up to the Reynolds' modest home, and the old woman frequently appeared with home-cooked meals and sharp observations disguised as idle gossip. The day Colonel Mitchell died changed everything. Security footage showed Jessie entering his office at 21 hours. 30 minutes later, military police responded to reports of a gunshot. They found Jessie alone with Mitchell's body, his service pistol on the floor, gunshot residue on her hands, and her wheelchair tracks through his blood. The memories of that night haunted Jessie more than any battlefield horror she'd witnessed. She had arrived at Mitchell's office for their scheduled meeting, finding the door slightly ajar. "Colonel," she'd called, pushing her wheelchair through the entrance. The overhead lights were dimmed, but his desk lamp cast enough illumination to reveal the scene that would condemn her. Colonel Mitchell slumped forward over meticulously arranged files, a single bullet wound to his right temple. His service pistol lay on the floor as if it had fallen from his hand. Blood pooled across the polished desk, dripping onto the carpet in a steady rhythm that matched Jessie's thundering heartbeat. Her military training kicked in. She checked for a pulse despite knowing the futility. Her fingers coming away crimson, she reached for the office phone to report the incident when the door burst open behind her. "Don't move." Two military police officers entered, weapons drawn. Their expression shifted from professional alertness to horrified comprehension as they processed the scene. A decorated officer dead. A disabled veteran with blood-stained hands beside him. Wheelchair tracks creating damning pathways through the spreading pool of blood. "I just found him like this," Jessie had explained, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her system. Neither officer acknowledged her words, their training overriding any personal judgment as they secured the scene and detained the only suspect present. The arrest happened with methodical efficiency. Jessie's rights were read as her wrists were cuffed behind her back, an uncomfortable position in her wheelchair. They swabbed her hands for gunshot residue before she could fully process what was happening. When the test flashed positive, something cold settled in her stomach. She hadn't fired a weapon in months, not since her last recertification at the base range. The trial moved with unprecedented speed. Jessie's public interactions with Mitchell had been respectful and professional. But several witnesses came forward describing heated arguments in the weeks before his death. A lieutenant testified overhearing Jessie accuse Mitchell of betrayal during their last public exchange. Base security cameras captured her entering Mitchell's office at 21:03 and exiting at 21:32, looking distressed and disoriented. No other individuals entered or exited during that time frame. Prosecution presented emotive documents indicating Mitchell had decided to cancel the specialized veteran program Jessie supervised, effectively terminating her civilian contractor position. Forensics matched the bullet to Mitchell's service weapon, which bore only Jessie's fingerprints, not Mitchell's. The gunshot residue on her hands matched the ammunition type. Security footage showed no signs of other individuals in the vicinity. The defense argued suicide, but the angle of the wound and absence of Mitchell's prints on the weapon demolished that theory. Shadow became agitated during Amanda's first visit to the detention facility. The normally disciplined service dog whined continuously, attempting to lead Amanda toward the exit rather than staying by Jessie's side. "He's never acted like this," Jessie commented, watching her companion with concern. "Something's bothering him." "Maybe he senses your stress," Amanda suggested, though her journalistic instincts noted the behavior seemed directed rather than general anxiety. The dog wasn't merely unsettled, he wanted to go somewhere specific. Robert Langley, the veteran defense attorney assigned to Jessie's case, fought valiantly despite overwhelming evidence. At 62, with silver hair and perpetually rumpled suits, Langley had defended military personnel for over 30 years. "Something doesn't add up," he told Jessie during pretrial consultation. Mitchell was right-handed, but the angle of entry suggests a left-handed shooter. And why would you touch his gun but not wipe your prints afterward if this was premeditated? These inconsistencies weren't enough to overcome the mountain of circumstantial evidence. Jessie's wheelchair limited her potential defense. She couldn't claim to have discovered the body and fled in panic, as her tracks clearly showed her approaching the desk, remaining stationary beside Mitchell, then departing directly. Her military training worked against her. The prosecution portrayed her as mentally disciplined enough to execute a calculated murder. Throughout the proceedings, Shadow's behavior grew increasingly erratic during visits. The German Shepherd paced, whined, and repeatedly attempted to tug Amanda toward the door. Military handlers suggested separating them, claiming the dog sensed Jesse's guilt and was becoming stressed. Amanda refused, recognizing the intelligence in Shadow's eyes wasn't distress, but determination. Martha Wilson attended every day of the trial, her arthritis-gnarled hands clutching her worn leather purse like a weapon. "Load of horse manure," she muttered loud enough for the military prosecutor to hear during closing arguments. The elderly woman cornered Amanda outside the courtroom during deliberations. "That dog ain't confused, honey. He's trying to tell us something. Animals know things we humans miss." The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. The military judge, citing the calculated nature of the crime against a superior officer and breach of the sacred trust between military personnel, sentenced Jesse to death by lethal injection. The unusual severity for a first-time offender raised eyebrows among legal observers. But with Mitchell's decorated service record and the straightforward evidence, few questioned the outcome publicly. Jesse was transferred to the Federal Correctional Complex in Florence, Colorado, the same facility housing the nation's most dangerous criminals. Her status as a disabled veteran earned her no special accommodations beyond the basic requirements of her wheelchair. Shadow was allowed monthly supervised visits, classified as therapeutic rather than essential, despite his service animal training. During her first week of incarceration, Amanda visited with Shadow. The dog's behavior escalated from anxious to frantic. He circled the visitation room, nose to the ground, before repeatedly pawing at the eastern wall, whining with uncharacteristic desperation. "I think he's trying to tell us something," Amanda whispered, watching the German Shepherd's determined efforts. "Or he just hates seeing me in here," Jessie replied, her voice hollow. The prison jumpsuit hung loosely on her frame. She'd lost weight since the arrest. "No, Jessie, this is different. He wants to lead us somewhere." Amanda knelt beside Shadow, scratching behind his ears. "Martha said we should trust him. She's convinced you're innocent." Jessie's laugh held no humor. "Martha still thinks Elvis is alive, and President Kennedy was killed by aliens. She was a combat nurse in Vietnam," Amanda countered. "She's sharper than you give her credit for. And she's right about Shadow. He's been escaping from my backyard every night, returning to the base perimeter. The MPs know him, so they just call me to pick him up. But he always goes to the same section of fence." For the first time since her sentencing, a flicker of something other than resignation crossed Jessie's features. "Mitchell's quarters are near that section," she said quietly. "Shadow's trying to go to Mitchell's quarters." The prison guard announced their time was up. As Amanda rose to leave with Shadow, Jessie grabbed her sister's hand. "Follow him," she whispered urgently. "Shadow doesn't waste energy." "If he's trying to show you something, it matters." Amanda nodded, squeezing Jessie's hand. "I'll start digging tonight. Langley's filing appeals, but we need new evidence." As they parted, neither sister spoke the truth hanging between them without new evidence. Jessie's execution would proceed with the same ruthless efficiency that had characterized her trial. The clock was already ticking. That night, Shadow refused to enter Amanda's house. The German shepherd stood at the edge of the porch, his powerful body rigid with purpose. Amber eyes fixed on the distant lights of Fort Carson. Amanda, exhausted from the emotional visit with Jesse, tried coaxing him with treats and commands. Shadow remained immovable, his training collar clutched uselessly in her hand. "Fine," she muttered, fatigue giving way to curiosity. "Show me what's so important." She clipped the leash to his service vest and followed as Shadow led her to her Jeep, pawing at the passenger door with unmistakable intent. The drive to Fort Carson took 20 minutes. Shadow's ears perked forward the entire journey, his attention unwavering. At the main gate, the night guard, a young private who had followed Jesse's case with uncomfortable interest, recognized Amanda from her press credentials. "Ms. Reynolds," he nodded, checking her visitor's pass. "Kind of late for an interview, isn't it?" "Following up on some details," she replied vaguely, grateful that her reputation as a journalist provided cover. "Just need to verify something at the administration building." The private's eyes moved to Shadow. "That's Lieutenant Reynolds's dog." "Right. The one from the trial." "Yes. I'm taking care of him while my sister is." She couldn't bring herself to complete the sentence. The guard's expression softened. "Go ahead, ma'am. Just stay in the authorized areas." Once through the gate, Amanda whispered, "Okay, Shadow. Where to?" She released the leash, letting the dog lead while she followed at a discreet distance. Shadow moved with purpose across the parade ground, past the administration building, toward the officers' quarters. The night was quiet. Most personnel long since retired to barracks or homes. Shadow stopped before a modest single-story residence with darkened windows, Mitchell's former quarters, now sealed with evidence tape across the door. Amanda glanced around nervously, knowing she was straying far beyond her authorized areas. Shadow circled the building, nose to the ground, before stopping at a small garden shed behind the main structure. The padlock hung open, either from neglect or recent access. Shadow pawed at the door, whining softly. Heart pounding, Amanda eased the door open. The interior smelled of soil and fertilizer, shelves lined with gardening tools and seed packets. Shadow moved decisively to a corner where a military footlocker sat partially hidden beneath a tarp. The container bore no name, its green surface dusty except for what appeared to be recent handprints. "What have you found, boy?" Amanda whispered, kneeling beside the locker. It wasn't locked. The hasp hung open, revealing the container had been recently accessed. Inside, she found standard military items, folded clothes, toiletries, books. Nothing remarkable until Shadow-Nose nudged aside a folded jacket, revealing a torn piece of camouflage fabric caked with dark, rusty stains. Blood. Amanda's journalistic instincts fired. She photographed everything with her phone before carefully placing the blood-stained fabric in a plastic grocery bag she found hanging on a nail. Shadow seemed satisfied with the discovery, sitting attentively as Amanda restored the locker to its original state. The following morning, Amanda called Robert Langley from her office at the Gazette. "I need a contact in the military forensics lab," she said without preamble. "Someone discreet who can test a blood sample without filing an official report." "I might know someone," Langley replied cautiously. "What have you found?" "Potentially evidence that someone else was in Mitchell's office that night. Shadow led me to it." The service dog? Langley's tone reflected skepticism. Trust me, this dog knows something. Jesse trained him to detect explosives in Afghanistan. His nose is better than any forensic team. After a pause, Langley provided a name. Dr. Patricia Morgan, Fort Carson medical examiner. Tell her I sent you. But be careful. This case has too many people watching. Dr. Morgan, a stern-faced woman with prematurely silver hair, examined the fabric in her private lab after hours. This is definitely human blood, she confirmed. And it's not fresh, consistent with the time frame of Mitchell's death. I'll need 48 hours for DNA comparison. We don't have that kind of time, Amanda urged. Can you at least tell if it matches Mitchell's blood type? Morgan frowned, studying the stain more carefully. Mitchell was type O positive according to his records. This appears to be type AB negative, much rarer. It's definitely not Mitchell's blood. Amanda felt a surge of hope. So someone else was bleeding in that office. I can't testify to that without a complete workup, Morgan cautioned. But off the record, yes, this came from someone else who was injured that night. Armed with this information, Amanda sought out Major James Wilson, who had worked under Mitchell and showed subtle support for Jesse during the trial. She found him at the base gymnasium, completing a solitary workout routine. Major Wilson, she approached directly, I need to talk to you about Colonel Mitchell. Wilson glanced around the empty gym before nodding toward an exit. Outside, in the relative privacy of the parking lot, he spoke in a low voice. They're watching anyone connected to this case. What do you want? Amanda explained about the blood-stained fabric. Watching Wilson's expression carefully, the major's jaw tightened, his military composure slipping momentarily. I've had my doubts from the beginning, he admitted. Mitchell was investigating something in the weeks before his death. He became increasingly paranoid, keeping odd hours, securing files in his personal safe rather than the base's secured storage. What was he investigating? He never said directly, but it involved shipment manifests, particularly weapons inventory. He requested unusual access to records from the quartermaster's office. Wilson hesitated, checking his surroundings again. The day before he died, he told me to follow the serial numbers if anything happened to him. I thought he was being dramatic. Did you tell this to the prosecutors? Wilson's laugh was bitter. I tried. My statement was taken but never included in the court records. When I asked about it, I was suddenly reassigned to supervise night training exercises, effectively removing me from the investigation. This revelation sent Amanda to Langley's office, where the attorney was reviewing Jesse's appeal documents. His cluttered desk disappeared beneath stacks of military legal codes and trial transcripts, post-it notes creating a yellow constellation around his computer monitor. The blood evidence is compelling, Langley acknowledged after hearing Amanda's update, but insufficient for appeal without chain of custody. We need something stronger. He shuffled through papers, extracting a document. However, I found something troubling. The court records are incomplete. The transcript jumps from page 342 to 359. 17 pages missing, coinciding with testimony about Mitchell's recent activities. Could it be a clerical error? In a capital case, virtually impossible. Military court procedures have multiple redundancies specifically to prevent such errors. Langley removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. Someone sanitized the record. Their conversation was interrupted by Langley's office phone. The attorney's expression darkened as he listened to the caller, scribbling notes rapidly. "That was my contact at the Department of Defense," he said after hanging up. "Jesse's execution date has been set. 72 hours from now." "What? That's impossible. The appeals process should take months, even years." "Not in military cases involving national security concerns." Langley's voice was grim. "Colonel Harris Mitchell's replacement has personally requested expedited proceedings, citing ongoing security risks. The paperwork was signed this morning." "We need to get back into Mitchell's office," Amanda insisted. "The real evidence must be there." "That's not possible. Harris has sealed it completely, citing classified material. Even military police need his personal authorization to enter." Amanda's phone buzzed with a text from Martha. "Dog won't stop barking at your backyard fence. Something's got him riled up, something fierce." "Shadow's trying to tell us something again," Amanda said, showing Langley the message. "We need to follow his lead." Langley looked skeptical but desperate. "At this point, I'm willing to try anything. Conventional legal channels are being blocked at every turn." They drove to Amanda's house, finding Martha sitting on the porch steps with Shadow straining at his leash beside her. The elderly woman's face was tight with worry, her arthritis-spotted hands clutching a faded photograph. "Found this in my albums," she said without greeting, handing the photo to Amanda. "Took it at last year's base Christmas party. Look who's in the background." The photograph showed service members in festive attire. In the corner, partially blurred, stood Colonel Mitchell in serious conversation with Colonel Harris. Mitchell's expression was confrontational, one finger jabbing toward Harris's chest. Harris's face showed cold fury, his hand gripping Mitchell's arm. "They weren't friends," Martha stated flatly. "Whatever the prosecution said about their professional relationship was hogwash. These men were at odds." Amanda studied the photo. This contradicts Harris's testimony that he and Mitchell had an excellent working relationship with no significant disagreements. "Liar, liar, pants on fire," Martha muttered. "Now, this dog of Jesse's has been trying to dig up my flower bed all afternoon. There's something under my hydrangeas he wants us to find." Shadow led them to Martha's garden. Directly adjacent to the fence separating her property from base housing, the German shepherd began digging frantically, soil flying between his powerful legs. 6 inches down. His nose struck something solid. Amanda knelt beside him, brushing away dirt to reveal a weathered leather document case. Inside, they found Mitchell's personal notebook, protected in plastic wrapping. The pages contained coded references to shipment numbers, dates, and locations, alongside names abbreviated to initials only. One set, T.H., appeared repeatedly, each entry marked with a dollar amount. "This is it," Amanda whispered, the 72-hour deadline pounding in her mind. "This is what got Mitchell killed." The sound of vehicles approaching made them all freeze. Shadow's ears flattened, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Through the kitchen window, they could see 2 military police cruisers parking outside Amanda's house. "Back door," Martha hissed, shoving the notebook into Amanda's hands. "Go. Now. I'll stall them." Amanda hesitated, unwilling to leave the elderly woman to face questioning. "Don't you worry about me," Martha insisted, steel in her voice. "I've been handling military boys since before you were born. Go find what that dog's been trying to show you all along." with Shadow leading the way. Amanda slipped out the back as Martha's indignant voice rose from the front porch. "Well, I never in all my born days. Do you youngsters have a warrant to go barging onto an old lady's property at this hour?" The clock was ticking. 72 hours until Jesse's execution. Less. Now. Amanda's Jeep bounced along the dirt fire road that circumvented Fort Carson's eastern perimeter. Shadow, sitting alert in the passenger seat, the German shepherd's ears remained perked forward, his attention fixed on something only he could sense. The military police visit to her home confirmed Amanda's growing suspicion someone was watching her movements. Perhaps had been since Jesse's arrest. Her journalist's instincts, honed through years of investigating local corruption, screamed that they were closing in on something significant. She parked behind an abandoned ranger station, pulling Mitchell's notebook from her jacket. The colonel's handwriting was precise, military in its organization, but deliberately obscured with abbreviations and numeric codes. Several pages detailed inventory discrepancies, weapons signed out for training exercises that never returned to the armory. Others contained surveillance notes on personnel movements, focusing on late-night activities at the base's storage facilities. The name T.H. appeared frequently, always accompanied by dollar amounts and offshore account numbers. Colonel Thomas Harris, Mitchell's replacement, and the man who had pushed for Jesse's expedited execution. "What were you investigating?" "Colonel," Amanda whispered, flipping through the pages. A folded paper slipped from between the notebook's final pages, a hand-drawn map of Fort Carson with several locations marked in red. One circled area caught her attention, the abandoned training facility on the northwest corner of the base, marked with a single word, proof. Shadow whined, pawing at the Jeep's door. When Amanda released him, the dog immediately oriented himself toward the base's northwest sector, confirming her suspicion. "You've been trying to take us there all along, haven't you? Getting back onto the base required caution." Amanda called her editor, requesting an emergency press credential for a developing story on military training innovations. The base public affairs office, accustomed to her regular presence and eager to maintain positive media relations, approved the visit despite the late hour. Martha called to report the military police had left after a cursory search, seemingly satisfied with her performance as a confused elderly neighbor. "You be careful, honey," Martha warned. "Those boys weren't just routine patrol. They were looking for something specific." The abandoned training facility stood isolated against the darkening Colorado sky, its utilitarian concrete structure partially reclaimed by nature after years of disuse. Military budget cuts had shuttered it 5 years earlier, according to the faded notice still taped to the chain-link fence. Shadow moved with purpose, leading Amanda to a side entrance where the security chain hung broken, recently cut. "Someone's been here," Amanda murmured, producing a small flashlight from her bag. The beam illuminated dust-covered floors marked with fresh footprints. Shadow followed the trail without hesitation, leading her through corridors lined with empty offices and classrooms once used for tactical instruction. The trail ended at a storage room in the building's deepest section. Inside, metal lockers lined the walls, most hanging open and empty. Shadow approached one in the corner, pawing insistently at its base. Unlike the others, this locker was secured with a combination padlock new, its metal gleaming in the flashlight beam. "Great," Amanda sighed. "Unless you know the combination. Boy, we're stuck." Shadow whined, circling anxiously. Amanda examined the lock, then remembered Mitchell's notebook. The final page contained a series of numbers, including what looked like gate codes and safe combinations. One 3-number sequence was labeled simply NW Northwest. She tried the combination, 174429, and the lock clicked open. Inside the locker, a waterproof tactical case contained a thumb drive, a handwritten letter sealed in plastic, and photographs of military vehicles being loaded at night. Amanda's hands trembled as she examined the pictures. They showed Colonel Harris personally supervising the loading of crates into unmarked trucks, assisted by soldiers whose faces were clearly visible. The letter, addressed to the Department of Defense Inspector General, detailed Mitchell's investigation into weapons theft and illegal sales, naming Harris and 4 other senior officers as conspirators. "This is what got him killed," Amanda whispered, understanding flooding through her. And Jesse was framed to cover it up. Her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Leave now. They're coming." Heart pounding. Amanda packed everything into her shoulder bag. Shadow was already at the door, hackles raised. Hackles. They slipped out a rear exit moments before headlights swept the building's main entrance, from her concealed position behind a dumpster. Amanda watched as Colonel Harris himself emerged from a military SUV, accompanied by 2 armed men in civilian clothes. "Sweep the entire building," Harris ordered. "Reynolds's sister was granted access to the base 30 minutes ago. Find what she's after and destroy it." Amanda retreated with Shadow into the darkness, taking a circuitous route back to her Jeep. As she drove away from the base, memories of Jesse's stories about Afghanistan surfaced, particularly one about Shadow's exceptional training. The German Shepherd had been taught to recognize not just explosives, but specific individuals by scent. If Shadow had been present when Mitchell died. "You were there that night, weren't you?" she realized, glancing at the dog beside her. "You went with Jesse to Mitchell's office. You know who else was there?" "Who else?" Shadow's steady gaze seemed to confirm her theory. Amanda needed to speak with Jesse immediately, but visiting hours wouldn't resume until morning. She drove to Langley's home instead, finding the attorney still awake despite the late hour. Case files spread across his dining room table. "We've got proof," she announced, laying out the evidence. Mitchell was investigating weapons theft involving Harris and others. This is why he was killed and why they framed Jesse. Langley examined the documents with growing excitement. "This changes everything. We need to get this to the right people immediately." "Not the military chain of command," Amanda cautioned. "Harris has too much influence." "No," Langley agreed. "The FBI and Department of Justice. I have contacts in both." He reached for his phone but stopped when Shadow suddenly growled, staring at the window. Seconds later, headlights swept across the front of the house. "Were you followed?" "I don't think so, but they knew I was on base." "Back door," Langley decided, gathering the evidence. "Take my car. Go to this address." He scribbled on a notepad. "FBI field office in Denver. Ask for Special Agent Diana Martinez. Tell her exactly what you've told me." "What about you?" "I'll create a diversion. Go." As Amanda slipped out with Shadow, Langley opened his front door to confront 2 military police officers and a man in a dark suit. Their voices carried clearly. "Mr. Langley, we need to speak with you regarding classified materials stolen from Fort Carson." The drive to Denver took just over an hour, Amanda constantly checking her rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. Shadow remained vigilant beside her, occasionally growling at passing vehicles. The FBI field office stood quiet in the early morning hours, but Agent Martinez, a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, responded to the emergency call, meeting them in the lobby. "Robert Langley vouches for you," Martinez stated, examining Amanda's press credentials. "That carries weight. Show me what you have." In a secure conference room, Amanda presented Mitchell's notebook, the thumb drive, and photographs. Martinez reviewed everything methodically, her expression revealing nothing. "This is significant," she finally acknowledged. "But pursuing charges against senior military officers requires extraordinary evidence. A dead colonel's notebook and some photographs might not be enough. My sister is scheduled for execution in less than 60 hours for a crime she didn't commit," Amanda argued. "These men murdered Mitchell and framed her." Martinez studied Shadow, who sat at perfect attention beside Amanda. "Your sister's service dog," she noted. "The one from the trial?" "Yes. Shadow was with Jesse that night. He's been trying to show us evidence ever since." "Dogs can't testify in court," Martinez said, but her tone had softened. "However, the timeline discrepancies in the official report are troubling. Your sister was supposedly alone with Mitchell for 30 minutes, but the base security logs show Harris accessing the administration building during that same period, despite his testimony that he was at home." Hope flared in Amanda's chest. "You've been looking into this already." "Let's just say Colonel Mitchell had made preliminary contact with our office before his death." Martinez gathered the evidence. "I'll need to move quickly on this. Where can I reach you?" "I'll be at the Florence Correctional Facility for visiting hours. My sister deserves to know we're fighting for her." As Amanda turned to leave, Martinez added, "Ms. Reynolds, be careful. If these allegations are true, these men have already killed once to protect themselves. They won't hesitate to do so again." During the drive back to Colorado Springs, Amanda's mind filled with memories of Jesse before Afghanistan, before the explosion that took her legs. Her sister had always possessed an unshakable moral compass, even as children. When neighborhood boys had tormented a stray dog, 8-year-old Jesse had confronted them all, taking a black eye in defense of the animal. That same protective instinct had led her to join the military, to specialize in diffusing explosives that threatened her fellow soldiers. The Florence Correctional Facility loomed like a fortress against the morning sky. Amanda waited impatiently through security procedures, Shadow undergoing the now familiar inspection before being allowed inside as a service animal. When Jesse was wheeled into the visitation room, Amanda barely recognized her sister. In just days, Jesse had lost more weight, dark circles beneath her eyes testifying to sleepless nights. Her hands trembled slightly, a new development that concerned Amanda deeply. "You look terrible," Jesse observed with gallows humor, reaching for Shadow as the dog pressed against her wheelchair. "Pot, kettle," Amanda replied, attempting normalcy despite the circumstances. She lowered her voice. "We found Mitchell's evidence. He was investigating weapons theft involving Harris and other officers." Jesse's expression remained carefully neutral, too many cameras and guards present for an emotional reaction. "That fits," she whispered. "The night Mitchell died, he called me urgently, asked me to meet him, said he had something to show me that couldn't wait. What happened when you got there? His door was ajar. I called out but heard nothing, so I went in. Found him already dead. Jesse's eyes grew distant. What the investigation missed was that Shadow was with me. He growled at something or someone as we entered, but I was so shocked by Mitchell's body that I didn't process it until later. Shadow sensed someone else. Jesse nodded. He kept trying to lead me toward the private bathroom in Mitchell's office, but the MPs arrived before I could check it. Looking back, I think someone was hiding there, someone Shadow recognized by scent. Harris, Amanda breathed. He testified he was home all evening, but security logs show him on base. More than that, Jesse continued, voice dropping further. Mitchell had been acting strangely for weeks. He'd asked me to hold something for him, said if anything happened to him, I should check the place where we first met. Where was that? A fishing cabin near Pikes Peak. He borrowed it occasionally for weekend retreats, said it cleared his head. A guard approached, signaling the end of visiting hours. Jesse squeezed Amanda's hand. Whatever happens, thank you for believing in me. Don't talk like that. We're going to stop this. Jesse's smile was sad. Just in case, take care of Shadow. He needs a job, a purpose. Don't let him waste away as a pet. As Amanda left with Shadow, her phone rang Langley, his voice tight with urgency. The MPs confiscated my files, but I managed to hide copies of our evidence. Harris is making moves to accelerate Jesse's execution. He's requesting an emergency override to move the date up to tomorrow morning. Can he do that? With the right connections and citing national security concerns? Yes. They're claiming classified information might be exposed during standard appeals. We need to find Mitchell's cabin. Amanda explained Jesse's revelation. There might be backup evidence there. I'll try to file emergency motions to delay the execution, but with the evidence in flux. Langley didn't need to complete the thought. Without solid proof, the legal system would proceed as scheduled. Amanda's next call was to Martha, explaining the situation as she drove toward Pikes Peak. The elderly woman listened without interruption, then said simply, I'm coming with you. Martha, it could be dangerous. Honey, I'm 78 years old with arthritis and a bad hip. What's the worst that can happen? I die a few years early. Pick me up in 20 minutes. I know those mountains better than you do. True to her word, Martha was waiting on her porch, dressed in practical hiking clothes and sturdy boots that had seen better days. A battered backpack rested beside her, along with what appeared to be her late husband's service pistol. Don't give me that look, Martha said, noticing Amanda's expression. Harold taught me to shoot when Eisenhower was president. I've kept up my practice. The drive into the mountains took longer than Amanda hoped, the narrow roads winding treacherously upward. Shadow grew increasingly alert as they approached the coordinates Jesse had provided, standing on the passenger seat with his nose pressed to the window. Mitchell's cabin appeared suddenly, around a curve, a modest structure of weathered logs overlooking a small, private lake. The setting sun cast long shadows across the clearing, painting the scene in hues of gold and amber. No vehicles were visible, but fresh tire tracks marked the dirt driveway. Someone's been here recently, Martha noted, squinting at the ground. Big vehicle, probably SUV or truck. Shadow exited the Jeep the moment Amanda opened the door, making directly for the cabin's porch. The door hung slightly open, another worrying sign. Amanda hesitated, but Martha marched forward with surprising agility. her husband's pistol held competently at her side. "If they wanted to ambush us, they'd have done it already," the older woman reasoned. "Place looks empty." The cabin's interior had been thoroughly searched, drawers upended and furniture displaced. Someone had been looking for something specific, and from the state of the room, they hadn't found it. Shadow ignored the chaos, heading directly to the stone fireplace that dominated the far wall. He pawed at the hearth insistently. "He's found something." Amanda knelt beside the dog, examining the flagstones. One moved slightly under pressure. She worked her fingers around its edge, lifting to reveal a small hollow beneath. Inside sat a waterproof case similar to the one from the training facility. This case contained a voice recorder, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope addressed to Military Justice Division, Department of Defense, with instructions to be opened only in the event of Richard Mitchell's death under suspicious circumstances. Amanda's hands trembled as she pressed play on the recorder. Colonel Mitchell's voice filled the cabin. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Richard Mitchell, service number 879-553-2271, recorded on April 17th. If you're hearing this, I'm likely dead. For the past 6 months, I've been investigating weapons theft from Fort Carson Armory, involving Colonel Thomas Harris and Major William Decker, among others. They've been selling military-grade weapons to private buyers overseas, disguising the transactions as training expenditures and equipment failures." The recording continued for nearly 30 minutes, Mitchell methodically outlining names, dates, account numbers, and locations. He described discovering the operation after noticing inventory discrepancies, his growing evidence, and Harris's threats when confronted privately. "I've entrusted copies of this evidence to Lieutenant Jessica Reynolds, whose integrity I trust implicitly. If anything happens to me, she will know what to do with this information. If anything happens to both of us, I've established additional fail-safes." Amanda and Martha exchanged glances as the recording ended. "That's why they framed Jesse," Martha said quietly. "Mitchell told them he'd given her evidence, but he hadn't actually done so yet," Amanda realized. "He was going to that night, but they got to him first." Shadow suddenly tensed, a low growl building in his throat. Through the cabin windows, headlights appeared on the access road, multiple vehicles approaching. "We need to go," Amanda urged, gathering the evidence. "Now!" "Back door," Martha pointed. "There's a trail down to the lake, old fishing path. Might be our only chance." They slipped out just as vehicles pulled into the clearing. From their concealed position in the trees, Amanda glimpsed Colonel Harris emerging from the lead SUV, flanked by men in tactical gear. The sun had set completely, darkness providing crucial cover as they retreated down the steep path toward the water. "There's a boathouse," Martha whispered. "Used to be. Anyway, Richard would take my Harold fishing here years ago." The small boathouse still stood, partially concealed by overhanging trees. Inside, an aluminum rowboat rested on ancient wooden slats. Martha moved with surprising efficiency, helping Amanda push the boat into the water while Shadow watched their back trail, alert for pursuit. Flashlight beams swept the shoreline as they rowed silently across the small lake. Amanda's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Langley. She answered in a whisper. "Where are you?" Langley demanded. "Harris has moved up the execution to 0600 tomorrow. That's less than 8 hours from now." Judge Lawrence signed off on it minutes ago. We have Mitchell's recorded testimony naming Harris and others, Amanda replied. We're at his cabin, but Harris and his men just arrived. We're trying to escape across the lake. Get that recording to Agent Martinez immediately. I'll keep fighting through legal channels, but without that evidence reaching the right people. The call ended abruptly as they reached the opposite shore. Shadow leapt from the boat, immediately orienting toward a narrow trail leading up to the county road. Behind them, voices carried across the water they'd been spotted. Go, Martha urged, pressing her husband's pistol into Amanda's hand. I'll slow them down. Get that evidence to the FBI. I'm not leaving you, Amanda protested. Martha's weathered face broke into a fierce grin. Honey, I survived 2 wars, 3 husbands, and disco. These boys don't scare me one bit. Now go save your sister. The sound of a boat launching from the cabin dock made the decision urgent. Amanda squeezed Martha's hand before following Shadow up the trail, the precious evidence secure in her backpack. Behind her, Martha settled behind a fallen log with a clear view of the approaching boat, Harold's pistol steady in her arthritic hands. Time was running out. 8 hours until Jesse's execution. Less now. The county road stretched empty beneath a blanket of stars. No vehicles in sight as Amanda crested the hillside with Shadow at her heels. Her lungs burned from the steep climb, the weight of Mitchell's evidence pressing against her back like a physical manifestation of responsibility. Behind them, the sharp crack of a single gunshot echoed across the lake, followed by several more in rapid succession. Martha. Amanda hesitated, torn between returning to help the elderly woman and completing their mission. Shadow made the decision for her, gripping her sleeve gently between his teeth and tugging her forward with unmistakable urgency. The German shepherd's training to focus on the primary objective regardless of distractions cut through her emotional turmoil. "You're right," she whispered, stroking his broad head. Martha knew what she was doing. We have to get this to Agent Martinez. Her jeep was hidden nearly 2 miles away, parked off the main road behind a stand of ponderosa pines, without transportation. Their best option was flagging down a passing vehicle, a risky proposition given that Harris and his men would soon realize the evidence had escaped across the lake. As if summoned by her desperate thoughts, headlights appeared around a distant curve, a vehicle approaching at moderate speed. Amanda positioned herself at the roadside, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible despite her disheveled appearance. The approaching vehicle, an aging pickup truck with a cracked windshield, slowed cautiously. The driver, a bearded man in his 60s wearing a flannel shirt and baseball cap, rolled down his window with obvious suspicion. "Car trouble?" he asked, eyeing Shadow warily. "My friend and I got separated during a hike," Amanda explained, approximating the truth. "We need to get to Colorado Springs urgently. It's a medical emergency." The man studied her for a long moment before nodding toward the passenger door. "Climb in. Dog rides in the back." Shadow jumped easily into the truck bed, positioning himself to watch their back trail as Amanda settled into the cabin. The driver, who introduced himself simply as Earl, asked no further questions, seeming to sense her distress was genuine. He drove with the careful precision of someone who knew these mountain roads intimately, taking shortcuts that shaved precious minutes from their journey. "Military dog, ain't he?" Earl observed, glancing at Shadow in his rearview mirror. "My son trained with those in the Army. Smarter than most people I know." He's trying to save his handler's life. Amanda replied honestly. We both are. Earl nodded, accepting this cryptic explanation without further inquiry. Well, I reckon that's reason enough to drive a bit faster. He pressed the accelerator, the old truck's engine protesting but responding as they descended toward Colorado Springs. Amanda checked her phone, finding multiple missed calls from Langley and one text message from an unknown number. Harris has authorized shoot on site. Martinez compromised. Use secondary contact. The message included an address in downtown Colorado Springs, a federal building housing multiple government agencies. The implications chilled her. If the FBI contact was compromised, how deep did this conspiracy reach? Who could they trust? She dialed Langley's number, the attorney answering on the first ring. Where are you? He demanded without preamble. Heading back to the city. We got Mitchell's recorded confession implicating Harris and others. Martha stayed behind to cover our escape. Amanda's voice caught, There were gunshots. Langley absorbed this with a heavy silence before responding. I've heard troubling things in the last hour. Agent Martinez was suddenly reassigned to a field office in Alaska effective immediately. The judge who approved the accelerated execution is an old friend of Harris from West Point. I received a text about a secondary contact at the federal building. Could be legitimate. Mitchell would have had contingency plans. But proceed with extreme caution. Harris has mobilized military police under the pretense of a security breach involving classified documents. They have your description. Earl, overhearing this one-sided conversation, cleared his throat. Ma'am, don't mean to eavesdrop, but sounds like you're in a heap of trouble. Military police. You say... Amanda tensed, suddenly aware of her vulnerability in this stranger's vehicle. Earl continued, If you're running from those boys, I might suggest an alternative to whatever government building you're heading to. My brother-in-law runs the KRDO news station. Back entrance has no security cameras left over policy from the protest days. You get your story on air. Whole world knows it at once. The suggestion sparked an epiphany. As a journalist, Amanda had been thinking too conventionally, following legal channels that were clearly compromised, but a public revelation would be impossible to contain or cover up. Earl, you're a genius, she said, pulling Mitchell's voice recorder from her bag. Can you take us there instead? The news station sat dark and quiet. The late hour, meaning only a skeleton crew would be inside maintaining the overnight broadcast. Earl pulled around to the loading dock, where a single security light illuminated a metal door marked Staff Only. Knock 4 times, then 3, Earl instructed. Tell whoever answers that Dale sent you. Good luck with whatever this is. He refused her offer of payment, tipping his hat before driving away into the night. Shadow stayed close as Amanda approached the door, following Earl's knocking pattern. After a long moment, the door cracked open to reveal a young man with tousled hair and suspicious eyes. Dale sent me, Amanda said quickly. I need to get a story on air immediately. It's life or death. The young man, who introduced himself as Trey, the overnight technical director, recognized Amanda from her byline photo in the Gazette. You're that reporter who writes about military stuff, he said, ushering them inside. What's so urgent at 3 a.m? An innocent woman is being executed at 6 a.m. for a murder she didn't commit. I have proof the real killers are high-ranking military officers at Fort Carson. Trey's eyes widened. That's, heavy, like career-making or career-ending heavy, depending how it plays out. It's the truth. I have audio recordings, documents, everything needed to prove it. Trey hesitated only briefly. Morning show starts pre-recording at 5. That gives us about 90 minutes to get your material reviewed and ready for broadcast. The station's overnight staff consisted of just 3 people, Trey, a board operator named Melissa, and Marcus, the security guard who had apparently stepped out for a coffee run. This skeleton crew worked efficiently, reviewing Mitchell's recording with growing astonishment. "This is legit," Melissa whispered, her face pale beneath her purple-streaked hair. "These guys were selling military weapons and framed your sister when she stumbled onto it." "Precisely," Amanda confirmed, organizing Mitchell's documents for the camera. "We need to get this on air before they execute her." Trey's fingers flew across his keyboard. "I'm setting up a breaking news segment to cut into regular programming. We'll need you on camera introducing the story. Then we'll play excerpts from the recording." Shadow, who had been lying quietly near the door, suddenly raised his head, ears pivoting toward the hallway. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "Someone's coming," Amanda warned, gathering the evidence. "Not your security guard." The station's main entrance buzzed, security cameras showing 2 military police vehicles parked outside, officers approaching the doors. Trey checked the monitor, swearing under his breath. "They're requesting immediate entry, claiming a national security situation." "They can't enter without a warrant," Melissa pointed out. "Tell that to the guys with assault rifles," Trey countered. "We need to buy time for Amanda to record her segment." While Melissa went to stall the MPs at the front entrance, Trey led Amanda to a small recording studio. "We'll do this quick and dirty," he explained, positioning her before a simple backdrop. "Just state the facts, introduce the recording, and explain what's at stake. I'll handle editing and broadcast." Amanda faced the camera, adrenaline steadying her nerves as she had done countless times during field reporting. "My name is Amanda Reynolds, my sister. Lieutenant Jessica Reynolds is scheduled for execution at 6 a.m. this morning for a murder she did not commit. The real killer is Colonel Thomas Harris, who framed my sister to cover up his involvement in illegal weapons sales from Fort Carson." She continued for 3 minutes, laying out the evidence methodically, her journalist training overriding her emotional connection to the story. As she finished, Shadow's growling intensified. Through the studio's glass partition, she could see Melissa returning with a worried expression. "They're insisting on searching the building," Trey reported, saving Amanda's recording to multiple drives, "claiming you stole classified material. We can hold them off legally for maybe 15 minutes, but that's it. Can you broadcast what we have now?" Trey shook his head. "Not until 5 a.m. when we have network access. Station management locked down the system after some intern accidentally broadcast test material last month." "We need another option," Amanda insisted, the clock showing 3:45 a.m., just over 2 hours until Jesse's execution. Melissa spoke up. "There's the emergency broadcast system. It's designed for immediate override in case of disasters." "That's federal equipment," Trey protested. "Misusing it is a felony. And executing an innocent woman isn't," Amanda countered. Their debate was cut short by the sound of breaking glass from the lobby. Shadow was on his feet instantly, positioning himself between Amanda and the door. "Back exit," Trey decided, grabbing a portable hard drive containing Amanda's recording. "Through the equipment room. I'll upload this to our cloud server even if they catch us. The story will go live at 5. They moved quickly through the darkened station, hearing voices and footsteps spreading throughout the building. At the rear exit, Trey handed Amanda the hard drive and a station van key. "Drive to our transmitter station on Cheyenne Mountain," he instructed. "Jake's on duty tonight. Tell him it's a code red broadcast. He can put you on air immediately, emergency system or not. What about you? I'll delete the local copies and claim you left before we arrived. Go." The station van started quietly, Shadow jumping into the passenger seat as Amanda navigated through the back parking lot, lights off until they reached the street. In her rearview mirror, she could see military police entering the building through multiple doors. Her phone buzzed with a text from Langley. "Execution preparations beginning. Where are you?" The drive to Cheyenne Mountain took 20 precious minutes, the transmitter station appearing as a small building surrounded by tall antenna arrays. A chain-link fence topped with barbed wire protected the facility, but the gate stood open unusual at this hour. Amanda approached cautiously, Shadow's renewed growling confirming her suspicion. "They got here first," she whispered, stopping the van out of sight behind a maintenance shed. The transmitter building's door hung open, no sign of the technician Trey had mentioned. Her phone showed 4:20 a.m. Less than 2 hours remained, and their broadcast option had been compromised. Amanda weighed her alternatives. The evidence was solid, but worthless, if she couldn't get it to someone with authority to stop the execution. The FBI contact was compromised, military channels controlled by Harris, local police unlikely to intervene in a military matter. The governor, she realized suddenly. As Commander-in-Chief of the Colorado National Guard, the governor had authority to delay a military execution pending review, but reaching the governor's mansion in Denver was impossible in the remaining time. Shadow whined softly, nudging Amanda's hand with his nose. The German shepherd's intelligence had guided them this far, led them to each piece of evidence. What was he trying to tell her now? "What is it? Boy, what are we missing?" Shadow pawed at her pocket where Mitchell's voice recorder rested. Amanda examined it more carefully, noticing a small SD card slot she hadn't seen before. Ejecting the card, she found markings indicating it was a high-capacity storage device potentially containing more than just the audio recording. Her laptop revealed the card's contents, dozens of files including videos, photographs, and documents. One video file was labeled simply "Insurance." She opened it to find Mitchell sitting at his desk, looking directly into the camera. "If you're viewing this file, standard protocols have failed," he began solemnly. "In that case, call this number immediately." A phone number flashed on screen, followed by a security code. "This connects directly to General Raymond Phillips, Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's expecting this call if it ever comes." Amanda's hands trembled as she dialed the number, entering the security code when prompted. After 2 rings, a gruff voice answered. "Identify yourself." "Amanda Reynolds. I have Colonel Richard Mitchell's insurance file. My sister Jessica is scheduled for execution at 6 a.m. for Mitchell's murder. But she's innocent. Colonel Harris killed him to cover up weapons trafficking." A pause. Then, location: Cheyenne Mountain Transmitter Station. "But military police are here. I have Mitchell's complete evidence, including his recorded testimony. Hold position. Do not approach the building. Confirmation code Blue Raven." The call ended abruptly. Amanda sat frozen, unsure whether help was truly coming or if she'd reached yet another of Harris's collaborators. Shadow seemed satisfied, however, settling into a vigilant but relaxed posture beside her. At 4:42 a.m., 3 black SUVs with government plates arrived at the transmitter station, followed by 2 military helicopters landing in the adjacent field. Armed men in tactical gear secured the area, while a silver-haired man in civilian clothes approached Amanda's position directly, somehow knowing exactly where she was hidden. "Ms. Reynolds," he called. "General Phillips, I believe you have something for me." The race against Jesse's execution had entered its final hour. General Phillips worked with methodical precision, reviewing Mitchell's evidence while his team secured the area. Amanda watched the older man's expression remain professionally neutral, despite the damning information unfolding before him. Only the deepening lines around his eyes betrayed his growing anger as Mitchell's recorded testimony detailed the weapons trafficking operation and Harris's involvement. "Colonel Mitchell contacted me 6 months ago with suspicions," Phillips explained, his voice carrying the graveled texture of decades of command. "I authorized his unofficial investigation, but insisted on absolute secrecy. Too many high-ranking officers implicated, we couldn't risk tipping them off." He checked his watch. "We have less than 70 minutes until your sister's execution." "Can you stop it?" Amanda asked, the question that had driven her for days finally finding its target. "I've initiated the protocols, but Harris has created procedural obstacles. He's convinced the local command the execution falls under special counterterrorism provisions, technically outside my direct jurisdiction without full Pentagon review." Phillips made a call, speaking in clipped military shorthand before turning back to Amanda. "I've dispatched a team to Florence with stay orders, but Harris has apparently restricted external communications at the facility for security purposes. They may not receive the orders in time." Shadow whined softly, pressing against Amanda's leg as the weight of this news settled over her. All their evidence, all their desperate work might still be too late. She thought of Jesse alone in a cell, preparing for death, believing her name would never be cleared. "We need to get to Florence," Amanda insisted. "Now." Phillips nodded to one of his aides. "Prepare the helicopter. Ms. Reynolds comes with us." He turned back to Amanda. "Your sister's service dog should come too, if we arrive in time. Seeing him might help stabilize her after what she's been through." The helicopter flight to the Federal Correctional Complex in Florence took 23 agonizing minutes. Amanda sat rigid beside Shadow, watching the Colorado landscape blur beneath them as dawn began painting the eastern horizon with pale fingers of light. Her phone showed 5:16 a.m., 44 minutes remaining. Phillips spent the flight coordinating a multi-agency response, his terse command suggesting a man accustomed to crisis management. "We have federal marshals en route," he informed Amanda, "and I've alerted the Colorado Attorney General. Harris's people are trying to maintain their communications blackout, but we've overridden it through NSA channels." As they approached the prison complex, Amanda could see unusual activity below multiple vehicles at the entrance, suggesting Harris had brought reinforcements to ensure the execution proceeded. The helicopter touched down in the prison's outer yard, immediately surrounded by confused correctional officers and military police with conflicting orders. "General Phillips, Department of Defense," Phillips announced, displaying credentials that parted the human barrier. "I have an emergency stay of execution for Lieutenant Jessica Reynolds." A prison official stepped forward, his expression uncertain. "Sir, we've received conflicting directives. Colonel Harris arrived 30 minutes ago with authenticated orders to proceed regardless of last-minute interventions. He cited national security protocols. Those protocols are being misused to cover up crimes. Phillips cut him off. I outrank Colonel Harris. Where is he now? Observing the execution preparations. Sir, they've already moved the prisoner to the preparation room. Amanda's heart lurched. How much time? They accelerated the timeline due to security concerns, the official admitted. Scheduled for 5:30 now. 14 minutes. Phillips issued rapid commands, dispatching his security team to secure the execution chamber while he and Amanda moved toward the preparation area. Shadow stayed at Amanda's side, his training keeping him calm despite the chaos around them. They encountered resistance at the detention unit entrance, 2 military police officers with orders to admit only authorized execution witnesses. Lieutenant Reynolds has a constitutional right to legal representation until the moment of execution, Phillips stated with cold authority. Miss Reynolds here is acting as her legal proxy. Stand aside. The hesitation lasted only seconds before the officers complied. Recognizing the general's authority, they were escorted through security checkpoints with unprecedented speed, but valuable minutes ticked away. Amanda's phone showed 5:24 a.m. when they reached the final corridor. Beyond reinforced doors, Amanda could see Jesse through a window strapped to a gurney, medical technicians inserting IV lines into her arms. Colonel Harris stood nearby, his back military straight as he watched the proceedings with detached professionalism. The sight of her sister, pale and resigned, sent a surge of desperate energy through Amanda. "We need to get in there now," she urged, Shadow picking up on her distress, his posture stiffening. A prison official approached with a handheld radio, his expression apologetic. "General, we have a situation. There's been an incident at the main gate, multiple injured. Emergency services are responding, but all prison movement has been frozen per protocol." Phillips took the radio. "This is General Raymond Phillips. Authorization code Echo 79 Delta. Override lockdown for the execution chamber immediately." "Sir, I can't." "Son, I'm giving you a direct order from the Joint Chiefs. Override the lockdown or face court-martial for obstruction of justice." The official relented, entering a code that released the final door locks. As they prepared to enter, Amanda's phone rang Martha's number. "Amanda, I'm at the hospital. Those military boys weren't much for shooting straight." The elderly woman's voice was weak but determined. "Tell me you stopped this thing. We're trying. Martha, we're at the prison now." "Good girl. You tell Jessie I'll be waiting with a home-cooked meal when she gets out." The call ended as they entered the preparation room. Harris turned, shock momentarily breaking his composed expression before he recovered. "General Phillips, this is unexpected. We're in the middle of a lawfully ordered execution. An execution based on falsified evidence and perjured testimony." Phillips interrupted, nodding to his security team. "Colonel Thomas Harris, you're relieved of command pending investigation for conspiracy, murder, weapons trafficking, and obstruction of justice." Harris's face hardened. "You have no jurisdiction here. This prisoner was convicted through proper military channels. We have Mitchell's recordings." Amanda interjected, moving toward her sister. "All of it. Colonel, the weapons sales, the offshore accounts, the murder. It's over." For a fraction of a second, Harris's hand moved toward his sidearm. but Phillips's security team already had weapons trained on him. With cold precision, Harris shifted strategies. The lieutenant was present when Mitchell died. She had the means and opportunity. Shadow was with her, Amanda countered, the German shepherd moving protectively toward Jesse's gurney. He sent someone hiding in Mitchell's private bathroom, waiting to ambush Mitchell. That's why you insisted Shadow be removed from the courtroom during the trial. He recognizes your scent from the crime scene, as if understanding his role. Shadow turned toward Harris, a low growl building in his throat. "Remove those restraints," Phillips ordered the medical technicians, who looked to the prison warden for confirmation. The warden, recognizing the shifting winds of authority, nodded tersely. As the technicians began removing Jesse's restraints, one of Harris's military aides entered the room, his expression urgent. "Sir, we have a situation. The news, the execution chamber's monitor, typically used for official witnesses, suddenly activated, showing Amanda's recorded testimony playing on KRDO's morning broadcast. Trey had managed to upload the evidence as promised," the aide continued. "It's playing on every local channel, and national networks are picking it up. The governor is on the line demanding explanations." Harris's careful composure finally cracked, his face contorting with fury as his carefully constructed cover-up disintegrated in real time. Jesse, still groggy from pre-execution sedatives, struggled to process the chaos around her. "Amanda, what's happening?" Before Amanda could reach her sister, alarms blared throughout the facility. The warden received an urgent radio call, his expression darkening. "Security breach at the east perimeter. All personnel to emergency stations. This execution is officially stayed by order of the governor." Amanda finally reached Jesse's side, gripping her sister's hand as Shadow pressed his muzzle against Jesse's arm, whining softly. "We found the evidence," Amanda explained, tears streaming freely now. "Mitchell's recordings. Everything. You're going to be exonerated." Jesse's relief was visible but short-lived. Harris, seeing his last chance disappearing, lunged toward the IV stand still connected to Jesse's arm. "If she talks, we all go down." Phillips' security team tackled him before he could reach the medical equipment. But in the chaotic struggle, Jesse's IV line was jarred, releasing a surge of the lethal cocktail before a technician could clamp the tube. "Medical emergency," the technician shouted. "She's received a partial dose." As medical staff rushed to Jesse's side, her eyes found Amanda's, clarity and fear replacing the previous sedation. "Am I dying after all?" she whispered. Shadow howled a sound of pure anguish that echoed through the execution chamber as Jesse's monitors began to wail. Chaos erupted in the execution chamber as medical personnel swarmed around Jesse's gurney. The prison doctor barked orders with practiced efficiency, immediately recognizing the gravity of the situation. "Get the antagonist cocktail now. Start a new line in the other arm. Push fluids at maximum rate." Amanda found herself pushed back against the wall, Shadow pressing anxiously against her legs as they watched the desperate medical intervention unfold. The partial dose of pentobarbital, the first component of the 3-drug execution protocol, was already taking effect. Jesse's breathing grew shallow, her eyes struggling to remain focused on her sister's face. "Stay with me, Jess," Amanda pleaded, her voice barely audible above the cacophony of medical equipment and urgent voices. "You've survived worse than this. Don't you dare give up now." General Phillips took command of the room, ordering Harris and his men removed and securing the perimeter to give the medical team space to work. The colonel was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of cold fury and calculation even in defeat. One of Phillips's aides approached with a satellite phone. "Sir, we have an emergency medevac helicopter inbound, ETA 3 minutes. Governor Wilson is on the line, demanding an update." Phillips took the phone, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Governor, we've stayed the execution, but there's been a complication. Lieutenant Reynolds received a partial dose of the execution drugs. We're stabilizing her for transfer to Memorial Hospital." "Yes, sir. The evidence against Colonel Harris is substantial and being secured as we speak." "No, sir. I don't believe the press should be informed of the medical situation yet." And meanwhile, the prison doctor worked with practiced precision, establishing a new IV line and administering a series of medications designed to counteract the pentobarbital. "Her vitals are stabilizing," he announced after several tense minutes. "The partial dose was fortunate if she'd received the full amount, or if the second and third drugs had been introduced. We'd have no chance." Jesse's eyes fluttered open, finding Amanda's face through the crowd of medical personnel. "Did we get him?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We got him," Amanda confirmed, tears streaming down her face. "Mitchell's evidence? All of it. Harris is in custody. It's over. Jess." A faint smile touched Jessie's pale lips before her eyes closed again, but the steady beep of the heart monitor confirmed she was stable. If unconscious, Shadow whined softly, straining toward the gurney until one of the medical technicians, noting the German Shepherd's distress, allowed him closer. The dog immediately pressed his muzzle against Jessie's hand, his entire body vibrating with concern. The medevac team arrived with practiced efficiency, transferring Jessie to a transport gurney while maintaining the critical IV lines. "She's stable enough for transport," the flight medic confirmed. "But we need to move now." "Her service dog comes too," Amanda insisted, gripping Shadow's leash. The medic glanced at the German Shepherd, then nodded. "Normally we wouldn't. But under the circumstances, and given his training, yes, he can come." The helicopter flight to Memorial Hospital lasted 11 agonizing minutes, the medical team working continuously to monitor Jessie's condition, while Amanda sat pressed against the vibrating wall, Shadow's head resting heavily on her lap. The dog's eyes never left Jessie's face, his usually stoic demeanor replaced by naked worry. Upon landing at the hospital helipad, Jessie was immediately rushed to the intensive care unit. Amanda and Shadow were directed to a private waiting area, where General Phillips joined them shortly after, his face showing the strain of the morning's events despite his military composure. "The doctor says she's responding well to treatment," he informed Amanda. "The partial dose was small enough that the antagonist drug should prevent permanent damage, but the next 24 hours will be critical." "And Harris?" Amanda asked, her journalist's instincts reasserting themselves through the emotional fog. "In custody, along with 4 other officers implicated in Mitchell's evidence. We're still looking for Major Decker. He appears to have fled when the news broke." Phillips paused, his expression softening slightly. "There's something else you should know. We found Martha Wilson." Amanda's heart sank. "Is she?" "Very much alive and raising hell at County General," Phillips said, the ghost of a smile touching his stern features. "Took a bullet to the shoulder but managed to disable 3 of Harris's men before they retreated. The local sheriff found her sitting on his porch. bleeding and complaining about trigger-happy government boys ruining her favorite cardigan. Relief washed through Amanda, a bubble of unexpected laughter escaping her throat. That sounds like Martha. She's being transferred here later today. Apparently, she's insisting on a room near your sister. Phillips checked his watch. I need to brief the Joint Chiefs and coordinate with the FBI on the weapons trafficking investigation. There will be a formal hearing regarding your sister's case this afternoon, purely procedural at this point. The evidence for her exoneration is overwhelming. After Phillips departed, Amanda found herself alone with Shadow in the sterile waiting room, the events of the past days crashing over her in waves. The German shepherd sensed her emotional crash, pressing his warm body against her legs as she finally allowed herself to break down, burying her face in his fur as sobs racked her body. She wasn't sure how much time had passed when a gentle hand touched her shoulder. Looking up, she found an older doctor with kind eyes standing beside her. "Ms. Reynolds, I'm Dr. Patel. Your sister is awake and asking for you." He glanced at Shadow. "Normally, we don't allow animals in the ICU, but given the circumstances and his status as a service animal, we'll make an exception." Jessie lay pale against the white hospital sheets, various monitors tracking her vital signs and IV fluids running into both arms. Despite the medical equipment, her eyes were clear and alert when Amanda entered, Shadow padding silently beside her. "There's my hero," Jessie whispered, her voice hoarse but steady as Shadow approached the bed, his tail wagging tentatively. She extended her hand, and the German shepherd gently licked her fingers, whining softly. "Both my heroes," she amended, looking at Amanda. "How are you feeling?" Amanda asked, taking her sister's free hand. "Like I've been hit by a truck, then poisoned," Jessie replied with dark humor. "But the doctor says I'll recover completely. No permanent damage." Her expression grew serious. "They told me about Martha. Is she really okay?" "Apparently she took down 3 trained operatives with Harold's old service pistol," Amanda confirmed. "She's being transferred here later today, already complaining about the food at County General." Jessie smiled weakly. "I should have known better than to worry about that old battle axe." Her expression sobered. "Tell me everything. How did you find Mitchell's evidence?" Amanda settled into the chair beside the bed, Shadow positioning himself protectively between them and the door. She recounted their desperate investigation, Shadow's persistent attempts to lead them to evidence, the discoveries at the abandoned training facility, Martha's assistance, the final confrontation at Mitchell's cabin, and General Phillips' timely intervention. "Shadow knew all along," Jessie marveled, stroking the dog's head. "He was trying to tell us from the very beginning." "He never gave up on you," Amanda agreed. "None of us did." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Patel returning with a tablet computer. "Ms. Reynolds, I hate to disturb you, but there's something unusual in your blood work." Alarm flashed across Jessie's face. "The execution drugs." No, we're managing those effectively," the doctor assured her. "This is something else entirely. When was the last time you had a complete medical workup?" "Before my discharge from Walter Reed, about 18 months ago." "Why?" Dr. Patel turned the tablet to show them laboratory results. These markers here, they're consistent with early-stage lymphoma. It's not conclusive without further testing, but given your military service in areas with known environmental hazards, I'd like to order a comprehensive oncology workup. The revelation landed like a physical blow. After everything they'd been through, the trial, the conviction, the near execution, the partial poisoning, this new threat seemed almost incomprehensible. "Cancer," Jessie whispered, her hard-won military composure finally cracking. "After all this, I might have cancer." Shadow sensed her distress immediately, pressing closer to the bed with a soft whine. Amanda gripped her sister's hand tighter, finding her voice despite her own shock. "We don't know anything for certain yet. And if it is lymphoma, early detection gives you excellent chances. Ms. Reynolds has a point," Dr. Patel confirmed. "If these markers are accurate, and we're catching this very early, modern treatments are remarkably effective. But I want to emphasize, this is preliminary. We need specialized testing." After the doctor left to arrange the additional tests, Jessie stared at the ceiling, her face a complex mixture of emotions. "Ironic, isn't it?" she finally said. "They couldn't execute me, so now cancer might try." "Don't," Amanda warned. "Don't you dare start talking like that. We didn't fight this hard just to give up now." A knock at the door interrupted them. Robert Langley entered, looking exhausted but triumphant, legal documents clutched in his hand. "I come bearing official news," he announced. "The military tribunal has issued an emergency order vacating all charges against Lieutenant Jessica Reynolds. Your record will be fully expunged, your military honors restored, and a formal apology issued." He placed the documents on the bedside table. "Also, I've been authorized to inform you that a substantial wrongful conviction settlement is being prepared." This news should have been cause for unmitigated celebration, but Jessie's reaction was subdued, the shadow of Dr. Patel's revelation hanging over her. Langley noticed immediately. "What am I missing?" he asked, glancing between the sisters. Before either could respond, commotion erupted in the hallway, Martha Wilson's unmistakable voice cutting through the hospital's hushed atmosphere. "Young man, I have been shot. Not rendered incompetent. I am perfectly capable of walking to see my girls without this ridiculous wheelchair. Despite everything." Jessie laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to lighten the sterile hospital room. "Some things never change." Martha appeared in the doorway, her left arm in a sling, her gray hair escaping its usual bun, her weathered face pale but determined. A harried-looking orderly stood behind her with an empty wheelchair. "There you are," Martha declared, surveying Jessie with critical eyes. "Well, you look like something the cat dragged in, but at least you're breathing. That's a sight better than the alternative they had planned." Shadow greeted the elderly woman with obvious delight, circling her once before returning to his post beside Jessie's bed. Martha acknowledged him with a gentle pat. "Good boy. Knew you were trying to tell us something important all along." As Martha settled into a chair, grudgingly allowing the orderly to help her, Amanda watched her sister's face. Beyond the physical exhaustion and emotional trauma, something had shifted. The truth had finally emerged from darkness. But the battle wasn't over yet. 3 months later, Fort Carson's parade ground stood resplendent beneath a perfect Colorado summer sky. American flags snapped crisply in the mountain breeze as officers in dress uniforms and civilians in formal attire gathered for an unusual ceremony. At the center of it all sat Jessie Reynolds, her wheelchair positioned before a podium adorned with the presidential seal, Shadow resting attentively at her side. The months following her near execution had been a whirlwind of medical treatments, legal proceedings, and gradual healing. The preliminary diagnosis of lymphoma had been confirmed stage 2, requiring aggressive treatment, but with a strong prognosis. Jessie had faced the diagnosis with the same determination that had carried her through Afghanistan. The loss of her legs, and the fight for her life and reputation. In the front row, Amanda sat beside Martha, whose shoulder had healed remarkably well for a woman of her age. The elderly woman wore a new blue dress, purchased specifically for the occasion, her silver hair arranged in an uncharacteristically tidy bun. Next to them, Robert Langley looked almost unrecognizable in a pressed suit, his usual dishevelment replaced by formal dignity befitting the event. General Phillips approached the podium, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We gather today not only to right a grave injustice, but to honor exceptional courage, loyalty, and service." He gestured toward Jessie. Lieutenant Jessica Reynolds faced extraordinary challenges with unwavering integrity. She survived battlefield injuries that would have broken many, only to face a miscarriage of justice that nearly cost her life. The investigation into Colonel Harris and his co-conspirators had revealed a weapons trafficking operation even more extensive than Mitchell had documented. 8 senior officers ultimately faced court-martial, with Harris himself receiving multiple life sentences for murder, conspiracy, and treason. The case had prompted a comprehensive review of military justice procedures, with new safeguards implemented to prevent similar abuses of power. By order of the President of the United States, Phillips continued, Lieutenant Jessica Reynolds is hereby promoted to the rank of captain, with full restoration of all honors previously awarded, including the Purple Heart and Bronze Star. Applause rippled through the crowd as Phillips pinned the captain's bars to Jessie's uniform, Shadow, seemingly understanding the significance of the moment, sat at perfect attention, his intelligent eyes never leaving his handler's face. "Additionally," Phillips announced, "in recognition of extraordinary service beyond the call of duty, the President has authorized me to present a special commendation to Shadow, Military Service Number K9-7734, for actions that directly saved the life of a falsely accused soldier." A specially designed medal was affixed to Shadow's service vest, the German shepherd maintaining his dignified bearing throughout, despite the faint wagging of his tail. The crowd's applause grew louder, with several veterans offering standing ovations. When Jessie finally spoke, her voice carried the strength and clarity that had characterized her military leadership before her injury. The months of cancer treatment had left her thinner, her once thick hair now growing back in a short cap, but her eyes burned with renewed purpose. "This recognition honors not just me, but everyone who refused to accept injustice, my sister Amanda, who never stopped investigating, Martha Wilson, who trusted Shadow's instincts when everyone else doubted, Robert Langley, who fought through legal roadblocks, and most importantly, Colonel Richard Mitchell, who gave his life exposing corruption." She rested her hand on Shadow's head. And this extraordinary animal, whose intelligence and loyalty transcended his training. Following the ceremony, a smaller gathering convened at Martha's house, where the elderly woman had prepared a feast despite Amanda's protests about her still healing shoulder. The backyard had been transformed with strings of lights and folding tables covered in mismatched but cherished tablecloths. Neighbors, fellow veterans, and the small circle of people who had fought for Jesse's exoneration mingled in the warm evening air. "The doctor says my last round of treatment shows significant improvement," Jesse told Martha as they sat watching Shadow play with neighborhood children who had been invited to the celebration. "Another 3 months, and I might be in full remission." "Course you will," Martha declared with absolute certainty. "After everything else, you think some microscopic cells are going to take you down." "Not likely." She patted Jesse's hand with arthritis-gnarled fingers. "Besides, you've got work to do. That foundation of yours isn't going to run itself." The Jessica Reynolds Foundation for Military Justice had been established using part of her substantial wrongful conviction settlement. Its mission, providing legal representation to service members facing questionable charges, had already taken on 3 cases. With Robert Langley serving as lead counsel, Amanda joined them, carrying a plate of Martha's famous apple pie. "Just got off the phone with the publisher. They've approved the advance for the book, apparently. The heroic service dog who uncovered military corruption angle is extremely marketable. Just make sure Shadow gets proper credit as co-author," Jesse joked, watching as the German Shepherd patiently allowed a small child to place a paper crown on his dignified head. He did most of the detective work. As twilight deepened into evening, General Phillips arrived, having changed from his dress uniform into civilian clothes. He carried a small wooden box, which he presented to Jesse with uncharacteristic solemnity. "These belonged to Colonel Mitchell," he explained, as Jesse opened the box to reveal a set of silver eagle pins. "His wife thought you should have them. She said Richard would have been proud to see you carry on his fight for integrity in the service." Tears, something Jessie had once rarely permitted herself, welled freely in her eyes as she accepted the gift. "I'll try to be worthy of them," she promised. The gathering continued into the night, stories flowing as freely as Martha's homemade lemonade and stronger beverages. Veterans shared memories of service. Amanda recounted the more humorous aspects of their investigation, and Martha held court with increasingly embellished tales of her standoff at the lake cabin. As the party wound down, Jessie found a quiet moment alone with Shadow on Martha's porch, the German Shepherd resting his head on her lap as she stroked his ears. The stars emerged brilliant against the Colorado night sky, the distant lights of Fort Carson visible on the horizon. "We made it, boy," she whispered. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Shadow looked up at her with absolute devotion, his warm presence a constant reminder that even in the darkest moments, loyalty and truth could prevail. From inside came the sounds of laughter and conversation, the voices of people who had become family through adversity, bound together by their refusal to surrender to injustice. Jessie gazed toward the military base where her ordeal had begun, no longer seeing it as a place of betrayal, but as a reminder that institutions were only as good as the people within them, and that for every Colonel Harris, there were countless others who served with honor. "Captain Reynolds," Martha called from the doorway, "you coming back inside? Robert's about to make a toast, and he specifically requested the guest of honor." Jessie smiled, turning her wheelchair toward the warm light spilling from the open door. "Coming. Martha, Shadow and I were just getting some fresh air." "Well, hurry up. At my age, we don't waste time waiting around." As Jessie rejoined the celebration, Shadow trotting faithfully beside her wheelchair, she felt something she had thought lost forever during those dark days awaiting execution hope. Not just for her own future, but for the system she had sworn to serve. The path ahead held challenges, but with truth finally uncovered and justice restored, those challenges could be faced in the light. In a world where loyalty seems increasingly rare, Jessie's story reminds us of what truly matters. Remember when we could count on our neighbors, when a handshake meant something, when service to country wasn't just a slogan. Jessie Reynolds lived those values, sacrificing her legs for her fellow soldiers, only to face betrayal by the very institution she'd sworn to protect. But sometimes, God works through the most unexpected messengers. Shadow, a dog who couldn't speak a word, showed more wisdom and determination than all those fancy lawyers and military brass combined. Martha Wilson understood this. At 78, she knew what younger folks often forget. Sometimes the simplest truths are the ones most worth fighting for. When systems fail, when corruption spreads, when justice seems lost, that's when ordinary people must stand tallest. Jessie's foundation now helps other veterans facing similar injustices, because she remembers what it felt like when the world turned its back. In our twilight years, we've seen enough to know that institutions change, politicians come and go, but loyalty, truth, and the bond between a soldier and her dog, those are the things worth living for, worth dying for, and, as Jessie showed us, worth fighting to survive for.